All right, I think we are good to go. Let me just double check all the usual things to make sure that everything is good to go. Make sure, just take a look. Take a look-see and see that everything is good. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. Who knows? Who knows? All right, I think we're looking good. I think so. Let's take a look here. Let me just double check. I can share this from ye old YouTube to ye old Twitter, and I think we're going to be good to go. So, I think we're going to be good to go. I think so. There's a good chance we might be good to go. Okay, I think that's good. So I think we are. Did it share? We there? I think we're there. Okie dokie. All right. Well, it's 2:30 Pacific Standard Time. We are ready to rock. It looks like everything is live and up and running. So let's do it. Let's run it. So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Patrick Lockwood. For the purposes of this podcast, I'm just Patrick, I guess. So, this is UnShrink Me, and UnShrink Me is a weekly podcast about mental health more broadly, clinical psychology, psychiatry, everything related to whatever helps people actually achieve better mental health. So typically this podcast focuses on what the research says, pop psychology, how to defeat pop psychology with actual science and things like that. Common sense, what's made sense from my clinical perspective and my professional experience as a professor and things like that, supervisor, clinician, etc. So, as always, if you think this is helpful, if you find that something I said resonated with you or could help other people, please like, share, and subscribe, because my general goal, just so everyone is perfectly clear, no matter what I say, no matter what I do, the goal of this podcast is just to protect the consumers, because there's so much bunk out there. There's so many pseudo-professionals and people who are gurus and people who promise things to people who are vulnerable and mentally ill and struggling. And I would like to protect the consumers and protect the profession at all costs if it's possible. So the purpose of this podcast is just to make things clear and simple and easier to understand, and to be ethically on top of whatever is helpful for people, and ethically to call out whatever is not helpful for people, as my experience in training and education has taught me. It looks like Jonathan is here. Yo, what is up, my friend? I hope you're well. I hope you're doing some sprints or something like that. I did mine earlier today. As always, I am not yet, at least, sponsored by Celsius, but I really love this stuff. It's great. It makes my life better, makes my job better. I feel more alert, alive, productive. Works for me. So shout out to Celsius. Very grateful for my energy drink of choice. Works great for me. So this week, obviously, it's been a very contentious week and difficult week for a lot of people because of certain events that have happened in society, which I won't directly address. And so today's podcast is going to be mostly focused on some pop psychology stuff that I think is worth discussing. I will take some time near the end to discuss my thoughts on resentment, anger, aggression, violence, and things like that, and make some more broad points about psychotherapy and getting a handle on anger and aggression and society's more general understanding or misunderstanding of the importance of anger and aggression. But that won't be the focus today, because I find that there's a lot of people that are talking at length about political things that have happened this week. And, as a psychologist, but as a regular person, I don't see it as worth anyone's time to whine or to criticize or to worry. Those are not traits that work for me as a person, though they don't help me succeed as a person. So I like solutions. I'm a solution focused person. So what can I do to take better care of myself, be a better example of my principles and my values in the world? Things like that are what cross through my mind when stupid things happen in society, and stupid things happen in society every week. So I try to not hyper focus on the topic du jour, because the topic du jour is, at least if you pay attention to the news, always going to be bad, etc. So I want to stay optimistic and focus on what we can actually do to make life better for everybody, because that's what I care about. I care about everybody. So first and foremost, without further delay, let's continue the show, shall we? So first up on the show, I think I want to just give a quick shout out, and I just retweeted this, so I'm just gonna basically give it a shout out again. So Lori Gottlieb, her handle is at Lori Gottlieb1, posted this on September 1st. So this is just perfect timing, I think. So on September 1st, and I know it's important right now, but here's what she said. She said, and her handle again is at Lori, Lori, Gottlieb, Gottlieb, 1. As a therapist, I approach every person who walks into my office with radical curiosity instead of judgment. I don't care if you're the Hollywood producer who seems narcissistic on the surface, the person who failed to protect their children from harm. My job isn't to approve or disapprove. It's to understand. When we lead with curiosity, something magical happens. We start seeing the wounded child behind the defensive adult, the fear beneath the anger, the longing for connection underneath the walls that people build. That doesn't mean excusing harmful behavior. It means recognizing that every difficult person was once a child who needed love and safety, and often didn't get it. What changes when you approach the challenging people in your life with curiosity instead of judgment? What stories might they be carrying that you haven't considered? Try it today. Ask, I wonder what's really going on for them, instead of, why are they being like this? So there's a lot that she says here that I respect and agree with as a clinician, especially, and as a supervisor and professor. But there's a couple of things I disagree with. So let me just start out by sketching the territory of things that I think are important, especially given current events. So first, she says radical curiosity is the best clinical outcome, right? And I think that as a clinician, what I try to instill in my supervisees, in particular my interns, is radical curiosity, because it is 100% normal. Let me say this as clearly as possible. It is genuinely, completely normal, statistically speaking, to be a regular person as a professional, and to have regular person feelings and biases and countertransference. You are allowed as a professional to have any and all feelings. It is not unethical or morally wrong to have your bias, to have countertransference or whatever. That's okay. What's unethical is when your bias or your countertransference gets in the way of you doing your job effectively, right? So as a clinician, radical curiosity is a great attitude to help counteract your bias and your countertransference as a professional. So I think that point is awesome of hers. And then she goes on to give some examples of like a narcissist Hollywood person or neglectful parent, all of which for most people produces an automatic reaction of disgust or anger or something. And she says, when we lead with curiosity, something magical happens. And I can tell you just from years of being a clinician, a professor, supervisor, it's 100% the case that radical curiosity creates an environment where people are allowed to unfold and open up and be understood. And now a lot of people, because of their bias and their countertransference, do not want to tolerate whatever is happening when their patient is opening up, because they're afraid, the clinician is afraid, the clinician is disgusted, etc. So that's a different problem. She says, we start seeing the wounded child beneath the defensive adult. Most adults that are being disgusting or stupid or angry mostly are just hurt or sad, right? And that's not weird. I think everyone kind of knows that. But it's hard to remember when you're deep in the middle of an argument with a friend, a family member, a spouse, whatever. The fear beneath the anger. And, I think if you think about current events right now, the vast majority of people that are having a hard time with Charlie Kirk being assassinated, I think are struggling with very garden variety fear, anger, and resentment, right? I don't think that that's super magical to say or radical to say. I think that anger is a very ordinary response. Like, just to start real quickly, humans being a mammal, all mammals have the same central nervous system to some significant degree, not completely or perfectly, but there's a pretty large overlap among rats, cheetahs, dogs, and so on and so forth with humans, chimpanzees. So we all have the same reflexes when it comes to feeling threatened, right? We have the 6 prototypical responses, which are fight, flight, run away, fright, yell and scream to scare people, fight, flight, fright, fawn, which is to play dead, freeze, which is to pause because you're overwhelmed and you're assessing the circumstances, and submit, which is to actually give in to a threatening circumstance. And what people don't seem to understand, whether it's because of current events or whatever, is across even mild threatening circumstances, we engage in one or more of these 6 reflexes: fight, flight, fright, fawn, freeze, or submit. It's normal, it's ordinary, it's garden variety. So when you're afraid or when you feel threatened, kind of the same thing, you're going to do one of these 6 things, unless you're like a Buddhist yogi person who's super aware in the moment. But most people are not built that way. And so you should have grace for people who are trying to fright because they're afraid, right? They're trying to yell and scream at you, get you angry, disgust you, etc. Hoorah, says Phil Bradley. Exactly. And so for me, I think she's 100% right that for the vast majority of people, when you're experiencing anger from somebody, they are trying to express how threatened they feel 9 times out of 10. Sorry, I'm so very sorry. So the issue becomes, there's the clinical context where a good therapist should be aware of the underlying motivations of people's problematic behaviors and feelings. But then she's talking more at the general level at the end. She says, excuse me, I'm so sorry. Steam room got me. What changes when you approach the challenging people in your life with curiosity instead of judgment? So here's one thing I really don't like about what she said, or I disagree with vehemently, which is there's this pop psychology, pop therapy notion that the average person walking around on the planet is going to be anything other than average. And I just don't think that that's reasonable or compassionate to expect people to be above average when the average person is average. So the average person, as much as we would like for them to be curious and not judgmental, I think it is garden variety and normal for people to be judgmental first and maybe not even get out of judgmental mode. I don't think it's sane or reasonable to expect the average person to be anything other than average. I'm not saying that we shouldn't strive for better in our unique individual circumstances with people, but at the societal level, we should expect people to be average because that's just what it is. So the average person is, generally speaking, reactive, and that's not weird. It's not pathological. It's easy to pathologize because when people are reactive towards us or about a topic that we're sensitive to, we think something pathological is happening. But the truth of the matter is it's almost never about us. And as a therapist, I can tell you, years and years and years of working with very sick people who've had all sorts of reactions to me, good, bad, and otherwise, it's never about me. Almost never. So it's very important, I think, to be clear that people are going to be judgmental. And I think people are going to not be curious. I think expecting the people in your life to be curious is silly. Now, if you're seeking out professional medical services or psychiatric services or mental health services, you should expect curiosity over judgment, 100%. Your therapist, etc., should never start with judgment or their personal bias. They should start with, how can I be more curious? That's what a clinician should start with. So thank you, Lori Gottlieb, for this important post, even though it wasn't your intention, I guess, to help me out today. It was really kind of fortuitous that it showed up in my bookmarks, as many things do. All right, I want to talk about some other pop psychology stuff before I get into the topic du jour a little more. So there's this guy on Twitter. All right, so there's this guy on Twitter who's not a bad guy. I don't have any anger or aggression towards him that I'm aware of, at least. His name is Dan Go. His handle is @FitFounder, FitFounder. On September 5th, he posted this kind of pop psychology thing that a lot of like fitness bros and tech bros and inspiration bros post on social media. And it's of the category of like pseudo deep, pseudo profound self-help advice that's like right on the edge of being convincing to people. And so I have to flag it and talk about it so that you get the full picture, at least from the point of view of a scientifically informed clinician. So here's what Dan said on September 5th. He said, you are always a 30-minute walk away from solving your problems. So just rule of thumb, when any person, whether it's myself, a brilliant person you like, a person you hate, a person you love, someone in your family, a professional, when any person says phrases like, this will solve your problems, they're almost always overgeneralizing. So what is overgeneralizing? Overgeneralizing is when you take a simple premise that has, let's say, context-specific value and you extend it past its context-specific value, right? So is a 30-minute walk useful in some situations? Yes. Is it going to solve all of your problems or something? Absolutely not. That's a nonsensical way of talking about it. But because he's an influencer kind of guy, this is what influencers say. They make these big, broad statements to get likes and clicks and all this stuff, and probably even engagement from people like me who are going to be critical. So here's what I said that same day. I said, incorrect. You are a 30-minute walk away from either feeling better, separating from an unhelpful context, or just refocusing. Solving problems is more complicated than this overly simplified advice. So mental health influencers in particular, people on Instagram especially, are notorious for saying these kinds of things like you're one meditation session away from feeling better and solving your problems and having better relationships. It's like, that's bullshit, because it's overgeneralizing. It's like overstating the case. Like this is a cure-all or a perfect solution or an easy solution. But for the most part, life's problems, whatever they are, relational problems, work problems, money problems, family problems, societal problems, they're very complicated. There are layers, multiple layers. There are multiple players and characters, multiple variables you can't control, some of them like time and history, etc. So overly simplified advice is basically problematic at best because it's oversimplifying and overselling a simple solution. So what I said, the more accurate version of what Dan was trying to say is, when you go on a 30-minute walk, it's going to probably help you do one of three things in my clinical experience. Number one, a 30-minute walk will probably just help you feel better. And now feeling better might allow you to be more motivated or to make a better decision, but that necessarily doesn't solve the problem in and of itself. A second thing that a 30-minute walk could do for you is just separate from a situation that makes you feel bad. So like if you're having, this is the prototype, right? So you're in a relationship with someone, a romantic relationship, and you're fighting. You have an argument once a week, like clockwork or whatever. So I've seen this in couples therapy a lot. It's like, 2 or 3 times a week or once a week or whatever it is, you have an argument. It's about the same stupid topics over and over again. And the stupid topics almost always have nothing to do with what actually matters in your relationship. And so what happens for a lot of people is they just get physically stuck in an environment that's bad for them, that perpetuates the argument. It's like, excuse me. If you're in an argument with your spouse in the kitchen and you get in arguments in the kitchen all the time, your brain has learned that the kitchen is a safe place to argue. And so a simple solution to at least stop the argument, it doesn't solve the underlying problems in your relationship, it just stops the argument, is to get the heck out of the kitchen, right? So like you can get out of an unhelpful context because we condition ourselves, right? We all are creatures of habit. We condition ourselves to look and feel and react in certain situations. That's all mammals. All mammals work this way, is our brains like patterns and certainty. So we have habits and rituals. And so we're in similar places across time when we're feeling similar things, So that's the second thing that a 30-minute walk can do. A third thing that a 30-minute walk can do is just help you refocus. So the great thing about going on a walk is it distracts you from whatever the problem is, and that will force you to refocus on whatever might be helpful, a different context, a different perspective, a different feeling, a different goal, a different need, doesn't matter, right? So Dan, I appreciate what you're trying to do. In spirit, I believe you're trying to do the right thing, but your methods suck and your methods are oversimplified. So as a professional, I would tell you that it's a little more complicated than that. And oversimplified advice is generally not helpful for people because it overpromises and is not specific enough to actually actionably help people. So please ignore influencers or seek out solutions that are more complicated for your complicated problems. Okay? Hope that made sense to everyone. Props to Dan for at least trying. Okie dokie. What is next on the docket here? Yeah, I think it's time for us to get into the topic du jour. I think we've warmed up enough. Pray for me if you're out there. So, I'm going to retweet something. So I don't know this person whatsoever. So his handle is Rat King, but the actual @ is @Mike, Mike, Isaac, Isaac. He said about a day ago, there needs to be some serious effort to get, in quotes, internet poisoning into the DSM-5, which is admittedly kind of funny. So, he talks about internet poisoning. So let me see if I can walk this out carefully and differently than maybe other people have. So I'm going to do everything in my power to not say anything political or personal or anything like that, and just try to be of service to the world if I can, in like a non-narcissistic way if it's possible. So Rat King said, we have to get internet poisoning into the DSM-5. Now, he might have been sincere, he might have been sarcastic, facetious, or humorous. I don't know what the spirit of that was, but I think it relates to the current events of the day. So there's a lot of political unrest in the United States right now because Charlie Kirk was killed, and I don't think that it's a stretch to say that there has been a lot of political unrest across the world for the last, I'd say, 2 to 4 years with all the wars, and all the violence and political violence and shootings and school shootings and there's a lot of fear and anger in the public consciousness right now. And it's all, I think, very understandable in many ways. Like, I think when you have repeated exposure all day for some people to violence, resentment, and anger, and hurt, and fear, I think that if that is the mental diet you have, if you're on social media, if you're on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and whatever other platform, and or TikTok, and you're constantly taking in a diet of fear and violence and anger and resentment, then it's completely understandable for your brain, for your mental health to suffer, because you're essentially poisoning your mind, like the Rat King said. And so what I think I can offer that may be helpful, and feel free to comment and either push back on me or tell me if this is unreasonable or naive or whatever, is I think one of the problems that modern society faces, which I talked about in my book up there on the shelf, The Fear Problem, check it out on my YouTube channel for free if you want. It's the audiobook version, is we have a diet. We have a mental diet of things that naturally induce fear. And fear or threat induces those 6 prototypes: fight, flight, fright, fawn, freeze, and submit. And so human beings of all kinds, from all cultural backgrounds, of all genders and sexualities, etc., are just regular people, and they're bombarded with algorithms that are designed to make you angry and afraid and feel threatened and feel othered and feel like the outgroup is attacking you and all these things. And because of that, you have a lot of media systems that profit off of our clicks and likes because of the fear getting us stuck in an algorithm. You have political personalities of all kinds across every part of the spectrum: libertarians, crazy liberals, crazy right-wingers, everyone who is like perfectly happy to participate in the tribalistic, you are threatening to me dialogues, which perpetuates a cultural norm of resentment and fear and anger and feeling other and feeling less than. And so one thing that may be worth considering for everyone who gets a chance to hear this is a kind of a difficult personal question, which is something I grapple with on a regular basis, by the way, is in what ways do I participate in maintaining systems of fear and resentment and anger? Because especially as professionals, especially as mental health professionals, our ethics code dictates that whatever is wrong with us that is getting in the way of our jobs and doing our jobs effectively is something we are supposed to do something about as professionals, right? So your therapist is not supposed to struggle with anger and fear and resentment, especially as it relates to anything social or political. Your therapist is supposed to be on top of whatever their mental health issues are, especially if they come from valid places of trauma, fear, shame, self-disgust, self-hatred, because they are different in some way, shape, or form. And something I noticed a lot in my career as a clinical supervisor is that it's very common for interns to be a little unaware of the various insidious ways that fear and resentment, anger and hurt and disgust show up in themselves as clinical interns. And it's not because these people are stupid or uninsightful. In fact, I've had the privilege, I would say, of working with very insightful and thoughtful people across my career so far. I am privileged, I believe, to work with great colleagues at my university. I'm privileged to work with great colleagues as a clinical consultant and a business consultant. I'm a very privileged person in many ways. I'm very grateful for the life that I have, and I acknowledge that readily and openly, especially on Twitter. And because I'm privileged, I feel compelled to say that, it's not weird or unusual, statistically speaking, to be a regular person and to not pay full attention to the various ways in which your own fear and anger and resentment show up in your professional life. This is especially important for mental health professionals. And because the world right now is currently struggling to some degree, right? Some groups of people don't care at all about what happened on Thursday. Some people care a great deal, or it's Thursday, Wednesday, whenever it was. Like, some people don't care. Some people don't care because they hated the person. Some people don't care because they're just numb and defeated, whatever. And some people care a great deal because they hated the person, or some people care a great deal because they love the guy, or whatever. Like, the whole spectrum of human existence and psychology is there. That's separate to or not separate, but it's not the focus of what I'm here for. The focus I want to hear for is like, dear mental health professionals, we have a really cool opportunity right now, in my opinion. This is just me. You tell me if I'm being naive. My belief is we all have a very cool opportunity right now to be the adults in the room. And I think it's high time that any mental health professional, whether you're a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a counselor, a drug counselor, a KDAC, a RAD-T, a certified mental health counselor, whatever your credential, whatever your culture, whatever your age, whatever your gender, whatever your religion, etc., I welcome everyone into this conversation about being the adults in the room and just calling out and staking a claim that it's ordinary and normal to struggle with anger and fear and resentment, self-hatred, disgust, hatred of other people, because that's part of being an ordinary, regular person. And where we as professionals should shine and excel, I believe, is in taking a look at these garden variety human instincts that are self-protective, tribalistic, and all this stuff, to have a better relationship with each other as professionals so that we can role model for the world how to take better care of each other. I think that is the unique position of privilege that we find ourselves in as professionals. Ethical professionals have a duty, I believe, to take a look at our current circumstances, look at our role, look at our scope of practice, our scope of knowledge, but also I would like to add our scope of self-awareness. Because scope of practice and scope of knowledge are two important variables, but I think a third important variable is scope of self-awareness. If you have very little insight and bandwidth for yourself as a professional, it's completely understandable that you're just going to kind of be reactive about anything that happens in your life. A good thing, a bad thing, whatever it is. But I believe that there are so many decent, ordinary people in the mental health professions that can take a look at today's circumstances and figure out how to be the adults in the room and role model what it looks like to grapple with and to have a better relationship with the ordinary garden variety fear, anger, resentment, feeling threatened, and all these things that show up when there's a big public trauma of some kind. It's just ordinary. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I don't think I'm wrong about that. I think it's normal. I think that there's no philosophy of psychology or mental illness that says it's pathological. I think it's absolutely the case that the vast majority of people, being ordinary people, first standard deviation personality traits, they get hijacked by hijackable things emotionally. I talked about that in my book, The Fear Problem. So I don't think that we're in an unusual time. I think that we just have an unusual responsibility as professionals, as clinical professionals, to take this opportunity, to take advantage of this circumstance, to role model what it means to be a competent, ethical professional who can understand, sit with, work with ordinary anger, fear, and resentment, disgust, shame, self-hatred, all the things that show up when big traumas happen in society. I don't think that that's an unusual request, but maybe some of you who are listening would be willing to say if you think that that's an unusual request. Because I think the public response to things that happen internationally or at home or, locally in the United States is predictable in the sense of like there's sides and the sides hate each other and all this stuff. But as professionals, our job is to look at the bigger picture and look at the micro, look macro and look micro. And the macro makes a lot of sense because of economic systems, media systems, political systems. But the micro is equally difficult, I think, to juggle with the macro when things happen, because a lot of professionals themselves don't have the best relationship, for instance, with anger. I talked about this a few weeks ago, but I'd like to re-up this conversation. So I'm going to try it again. Anger is interesting in the mental health world. I think Jonathan Shedler put out a post about this on Twitter weeks ago, which I talked about. So, mental health professionals of all kinds, interns, licensed people, psychiatrists, psychologists, clinicians, counselors, whatever, you're going to have anger reactions to things. It is normal. The question becomes, or there's two questions actually. So number one, once you notice anger, what are you doing with it? Are you disavowing it? Are you sitting with it? Are you rationalizing it? What are you doing? And why are you making that choice? Question number two is, where does that really come from? Is the anger about you, your values, your beliefs, your history of your own trauma or feeling less than or something like that? Or is it about what the patient is saying and doing? Are they projecting onto you, so on and so forth? But beyond all of that, what is your ethical duty once you notice you have a feeling? Right? But what I never want to encourage as a professional is the idea that you're not supposed to have feelings like anger. You're allowed to be angry about things as a professional. You're allowed to experience even moral outrage as a professional. So there's nothing inherently wrong with having feelings of anger as a professional. In fact, I would go so far to argue to say the people that have the best relationship with anger as professionals will likely be able to help other people who are struggling with their own anger better. I think for a lot of mental health professionals, they cannot tolerate their patients' anger. And because of that, they never get to work through that in therapy. And I think the main reason why most patients who have anger because of PTSD, a personality disorder, shame, narcissism, whatever it is, depression, whatever the cause of the anger, most therapists don't want to tolerate it. And so they never get to work through it with their patients. And I think when the therapist can finally recognize in themselves, what are my prototypes? What are the schemas in my mind personally that allow me to relate with anger, to show up with anger as the first choice? To go back to those 6 prototype reactions, fight, flight, fright, fawn, freeze, and submit, I would say fight and fright, F-R-I-G-H-T, are the 2 anger responses or rage responses. And so the question then becomes, when you as a professional want to fight, or when you as a professional want to fright, why is that? Is it for good reasons? Is it for, let's say, personally, morally valid reasons? Is it for societally, morally valid reasons? It's often the case that all human beings are good at justifying their pathological desires, their defensive desires, through moral reasoning. So it's okay if you want to justify your anger through moral reasoning. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's actually the most adaptive and useful thing for the patient. Whether you agree with the patient or disagree with them, whether you like them or don't like them, it doesn't matter to me. It can be equally pathological. You can be colluding, to use a technical word from the psychodynamic world, with a patient if you both share the same moral or political beliefs and you're both morally justified and righteously angry about something. But that doesn't mean it's actually good for their mental health, necessarily. It might not help their depression or their PTSD just because you think alike. I'm going to say that one more time. You can be an otherwise smart and competent mental health professional and have similar values, moral principles, or even politics as your patient, and you can be colluding with them when they are angry and when you are both righteously angry, because it might be what's comfortable for both of you, but it might not be what's most adaptive for that patient to resolve their clinical problem. Jonathan says, I was in patterns of avoidance towards my own anger for many years. I had to befriend and integrate it in order to do good work with clients over it. Exactly. That right there, it's 2 sentences. But the integrate and befriend your anger thing is very difficult for people because some people want to overreact and justify their anger, which is not having a good relationship with it. Or they want to avoid it altogether. And neither approach is actually adaptive for most therapists and especially for most patients. So when you have righteous anger as a therapist, you're probably not helping your patient. I'm going to say that one more time. When you have righteous anger as a therapist, as a psychiatrist, you're probably not helping your patient. You're probably either, number 1, acting on your own countertransference, number 2, acting on some projection of the patient's, or number 3, colluding with a shared value or principle or political ideal with the patient. All 3 of those things are often maladaptive for the patient's outcome. So I'm going to say that one more time as clearly and humanly as possible. Maybe this will get me canceled. I don't fucking care. I believe it's the truth. As a supervisor, I've seen it work for people, so I believe I'm correct. When you are morally outraged about the patient or on behalf of the patient, when you are experiencing righteous anger, either on behalf of the patient or about the patient, like against the patient, you are likely not helping that person. You are doing one of 3 things when you're experiencing righteous anger, either with the patient or at the patient. Number 1, you're probably most likely reliving some of your own biases and countertransference. Or you're colluding on political values or other moral values with the patient. Including is usually not helpful. Or number 3, you're just experiencing projective identification with the patient. Whichever of those 3 things is happening, you can determine them by how you're feeling and talk to colleagues and supervisors about it. But I'm telling you all that it's totally normal to have feelings of anger, and especially righteous anger, when events happen that affect you, or when patients say and do things that you like or don't like. It's totally okay and totally normal. It's not pathological. However, it can be very problematic if your goal is to actually help the patient with their clinical goals. Because it's one of 3 things. It's colluding, it's bias and countertransference, or you're experiencing probably projective identification or something similar to that. So, moral anger, righteous anger has basically no place as a clinical psychologist in the therapy room. Our job is to be aware of our reactions and not allow them to influence the patient away or whatever from their goals. Jonathan says, I didn't recognize his anger was a problem, avoiding it was a problem until it was pointed out, and shared models of how to deal with it in a healthy way. Good. I'm glad you found a healthy way to deal with it, Jonathan, because I think most therapists don't. So, just to be clear, I want every person out there who's listening, both regular people and mental health professionals, to understand that your feelings are okay. You're allowed to have them. They may not be helpful to you in many ways, but you're allowed to have them. And I'm not here to tell you not to have your feelings. I believe that every human being should learn to have a better relationship with their emotions. And so what I'm trying to share right now for my colleagues in particular, and so for those of you consuming therapy services, consuming psychiatric services, counseling services, coaching services, whatever, I want you to understand that your therapist should never collude with you. They should never get worked up with you about things. It's okay for them to empathize and understand. However, there should be a limit to that. There should be a ceiling to that. It shouldn't last the entire session or something. So the question becomes, in what ways as a professional are you actually helping people if you're either colluding or living out your countertransference and your bias, or if you're experiencing projective identification, you can't see it. So moral outrage, clinicians, when clinicians experience moral outrage, righteous anger, it's very concerning to me. And it's concerning to me no matter who is having the feelings. I can like you and agree with you and still think your behavior is problematic. And I've said this to my colleagues clearly, without shame or hesitation. I've said this to my interns without shame or hesitation. You are allowed to have your feelings. You're not allowed to ignore the consequences of how you handle them or don't handle them. And that, I believe, is a current problem right now, because I've looked on Twitter and similar places and seen so many clinicians respond in the aftermath of what happened to Charlie Kirk in a way that I do not agree with as a professional. Now, I'm not here to censor anybody. I don't have that power, and I don't have that desire. However, I believe it's my ethical duty to call out what I believe is unprofessional behavior. And so if you notice, if you're paying the right kind of attention, you notice that what I'm saying has nothing to do with the politics of the situation or even how you feel about the person. It has to do with your behavior and how you handle how you feel and how you handle what your principles are. There's no part of me that wants to tell you how to feel or what beliefs to have. As an ethical professional, it is never my job to tell my interns how to feel or how to live out their personal values. That is not my job as a supervisor, as a professor, as a clinician, as a consultant. That's not my job. My job, crystal clear, is to say, in what ways are your behaviors, the ways you're handling your reactions, helpful to the patient or not? That's the question. And then a second question is, what are you role modeling? So when a professional goes out there in the real world, on Twitter, on Instagram, Facebook, whatever it is, and they're just vomiting their anger and their fear, how does that look for the profession? What does that actually do to inspire trust and confidence in the profession if you can't handle your fucking feelings? It's very confusing to me. And I know that I curse and I burp and all this stuff, and most of that's just like parody. I'm trying to make fun of the fact that like there's a professionalism fetish in society, in our culture. I'm flipping off the professionalism fetish in our culture. That being said, I also recognize that there's a very crystal clear impact that all of us have as professionals when we are online, when we create content, when we do podcasts, when we post things on social media platforms. I would like to just be Patrick. I think it'd be awesome if I could just be Patrick and I could post hedonistically anything and everything that I want to say. I could just post every angry thought, every happy thought, every sad thought, every horny thought. I could just post them all. I could post every last one of them as a regular person on any social media platform I wish, if I were just Patrick. But the truth of the matter is, for all of us with a professional degree and a professional license, is that we are no longer just regular people. We have all consciously, unfortunately, made the stupid choice to live two lives simultaneously. We've made the choice to live a public professional life and a public personal life. And you can't just do one. Thank you, Jonathan. Distinct categorization is important. So for me, I believe that, dear professionals of all backgrounds, of all political belief systems, of all cultures, I invite you to try to be the adults in the room about big things that happen in society. I think it's very difficult because we're all regular people with feelings and stuff. And those feelings and those values often drive our behavior. And that's okay. Excuse me. And so the reason is, if we don't take this opportunity to try to role model being the adults in the room, I believe that we're missing out on some really cool public teachable moments for society. There's so much wrong with pop psychology and mental health influencers. They're all disgusting to me, right? And I've said it publicly over and over again. And at the same time, there's a super cool opportunity because of this tragedy, unfortunately, where people of all backgrounds and belief systems can get together and try to role model being aware of things like righteous anger, of reactions like, moral outrage, and then do something more productive for society and more productive for your patients and your colleagues and your interns and your employees with those reactions. Sometimes saying nothing is useful. Sometimes saying less is useful. It's a question of, what's your actual goal? I went through a lot of consideration before today's podcast. I'm very well of the position that I occupy in my local environment, in my community, at my university, in my businesses, with my friends, with my colleagues. I'm acutely aware of the layers and the dynamics of my life and the consequences of my choices to go live every week, to do things like burp on camera, heaven forbid, and all these kind of curse. Like, I'm acutely aware of what I look like and what I sound like and what the consequences are. I've been soft canceled a few times, whatever, lost business opportunities, and I don't particularly care about it. I'm cool with it. I have come to understand that sometimes I will not be able to help all people because of how I show up. However, my bigger aspirational goal as a professional, which I think should be universal, is to try to improve and grow and do better despite what you once were. So I may not in the future curse so much, for instance. I may or may not. I don't know. I don't care, honestly, at this point. But if I believe that some greater alignment with my principles or whatever, my goals, dictates that I do that less, I'll do that less, right? As just an easy example. And that's like not like life-changing or world-changing. It's an example. And I think that right now, the coolest opportunity in the world exists for all mental health professionals of all backgrounds and all nations to come out and do cool stuff and role model for the public, for the consumers of therapy, having a healthy reaction to aggression, having a healthy relationship with your anger, having a healthy relationship with your moral outrage, having a healthy reaction in relationship with righteous anger. I think there are so many people that can do so much good for the world right now if they just look big picture enough and then take a hard look in the mirror. This is the hard thing for me, and it's the hard thing for most people I know. If you take a good look in the mirror at yourself, if you take a look at the most disgusting things about you as a person, it's not super pretty. That's true for professionals. In fact, I would say professionals are often on the more disgusting side because we tend to be more narcissistic, we tend to be more psychopathic, we tend to be more ultra compassionate and things like that, which means we live more at the personality extremes than the average person walking around on the planet, which means we're more capable of emotionally and socially problematic thoughts and feelings and goals and behaviors. So because of that, I think a lot of professionals are afraid to look at their relationship with anger, righteous anger in particular, moral outrage in particular, because they just want to live in a comfortable stasis with their moral outrage, with their righteous anger. And Lord knows on this podcast every week, I have plenty of moments of righteous anger. And I try to have a better relationship with it when I can. What I'm trying to role model publicly, just so everyone is clear, is a relatively healthy and honest and open relationship with righteous anger. You can check my work. You can criticize me. You can come at me, and I will accept it. If you believe my righteous anger is misdirected about these influencers and stuff, you tell me, and I'll take it into consideration because I am not above scrutiny. I have never been, and I will always be a person who deserves scrutiny. Always. Because I'm a professional in a public sphere. And I believe that every other professional in a public sphere should have a similar attitude for ethical reasons. We are not above scrutiny. We are not so special, so smart, so mentally healthy that we are above scrutiny when we say stupid shit online. When we just share our random personal opinions online, that doesn't mean that people aren't thinking about us like professionals. It's unfortunate, but we're always trapped with being both regular people and also professionals. And so, again, my takeaway, my main summary point for this episode, for this topic is, please have whatever feelings you have about the circumstances that happened this week. Please do not disavow your feelings. I don't believe that's helpful as professionals. I also believe that professionals, mental health professionals, have an obligation to take a look at reactions we have as professionals, such as righteous anger or moral outrage, and examine where they come from. And I don't think that's a strange request. I think that it's a normal feeling to have. And I think that in clinical supervision, you look at every normal feeling you have and see if it's, collusion, countertransference, bias, projection, whatever. I'm talking about the most garden variety reactions that humans don't like to talk about in public. And I believe it's my duty to talk about the things we're not supposed to talk about. Publicly, clearly, honestly. Because I think that we can all do better, myself included. I think the whole profession, the whole industry can do better. I think all of us can do just a little bit better. And I believe optimistically, believe it or not, this is actually a monologue optimism, an optimism monologue. I genuinely believe that every professional that hears this and hears what I'm saying and at the barest minimum understands my intention can go, maybe I should have a different relationship with moral outrage. Maybe my righteous anger isn't so helpful in X, Y, and Z circumstances. And if that's the win, then I'll be a happy camper. Because I don't care what your politics are. I don't care what your morals are. I don't have a relationship with them. I'm not attached to any of that stuff. That's your life. Live whatever life you want. I wish you the best. I hope that you have the best possible life. And I believe that one way for every mental health professional to have the best possible life is to have the best possible relationship with the dark, nasty parts of ourselves that we don't want to talk about publicly. I believe that's how we thrive as mental health professionals, is by looking at the dark, nasty parts of ourselves that we don't want the world to see, that we're ashamed of showing the world. And I don't think we should feel ashamed. I think it's perfectly ordinary to have feelings like moral outrage, righteous anger, disgust, shame, hatred, resentment. That is part of the human experience. And it's not unique to a particular person, a particular age group, a particular generation, a particular culture or belief system or whatever. It's the human experience. And I think healthier therapists, people who are trying their best to be integrated, like Jonathan said earlier, will be able to take a look at moral outrage and anger and resentment and hatred and have a better relationship with it. So I beg every clinician, every mental health professional to just have a better relationship with these feelings and notice them. And if you need help, if you need consultation, I'm here. I'm happy to speak to you in an unbiased and non-judgmental way. If you need local support, I can help you find support locally. I think that this is a super cool opportunity. I believe that part of what happens when tragedy happens in society is you have an opportunity to do something different, right? Whenever we fail, whenever bad things happen, the best way to reframe it as a therapist is to see it as an opportunity to do something differently and to have a better experience. And so I believe that mental health professionals could, and probably should, ethically speaking, take a look at righteous anger, moral outrage, disgust, things like that, and just have a better relationship with it. And I don't say this with any judgment towards any person of any political group or religious belief system or age or whatever. This is as about a neutral a comment as possible because I think it's a universal human experience. And I think when big things happen in society, it provokes in all of us these types of reactions and our unique ways of them showing up and happening. So I hope that makes sense to everyone. I hope you understand where I'm coming from and what my goal is, and that I'm here as a collaborator, as an ally for anyone who wants to kind of take on the challenges of looking at your own anger, your own hurt, your self-disgust, your disgust towards other people, self-righteous anger, or just righteous anger in general, moral outrage. Like, if you have a better relationship with those feelings and reactions, I believe you'll help people better. That's what I genuinely believe. And clearly, I'm no fucking Buddhist or enlightened person. I'm just saying that this is something that really sticks out to me as a result of the things that have happened. This is my way of coping and trying to make sense of the world when people are overwhelmed around me all the time. So I hope this is helpful. I hope that there's something in this that works for you to help you do better and get better and feel better and have a better relationship with yourself. Because it's what works for me. It's what works for my interns and my colleagues. I don't think it's a weird approach or an unusual take. And I just hope it helps. So I really thank you all for coming out to chat with me today. The chat wasn't super funny or evocative today because I think this was a more serious topic. I really appreciate you sticking it out and commenting and watching. Full gratitude to everyone who supports me because I've had a lot of support in my career, and especially in the last few months, a lot of great people like Jonathan have showed up in my life. And so thank you for being here and being part of this process with me. And I really look forward to seeing you all next week because, as always, there's more stuff to talk about, make fun of, criticize, expand on. And if you found this helpful, if you believe that what I said today could help you or someone you know, please share this with someone so that someone can have a different perspective and a different experience of what's happened recently so that their lives can get better, so they can do better at their work. That's the only thing I'm trying to do. I'm trying to protect the consumers by building up the professionals. And I think we do that by being honest about who we are and how just like ordinary we are. And part of being ordinary is having socially unpleasant feelings and thoughts. And that's okay. So I hope you have a good rest of your weekend. I'm not going to end on a joke this week because it's kind of a heavy topic. I appreciate you all, and I'll see you all next week. And please, please, please take extra good care of yourself. Please take good care of the people around you. Please eat good food, exercise, laugh, have fun with your friends, be very good to yourself.